Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fascinating question, actually.
Mm,
In a world where AI like ChatGPT is, well, everywhere, how does limiting access shape how teams solve problems? We're looking at physics
Yeah,
specifically.
exactly. We've got this great study called Less is More, a multimodal exploration of how limited AI shapes team physics problem solving.
Less is more. Okay.
Yeah, it's from Sejong University in South Korea, published, I think, May 2025 in New Physics, Muli. And it really challenges, the basic idea that more AI is always better.
Right. It feels totally backwards. Less AI access leading to better team results in physics.
Right.
We usually think give everyone the tools, right?
That's the common assumption. But this research, it suggests that putting some structure around AI use can actually drive deeper thinking.
Okay. So how did they test this? What was the setup?
Well, they had undergraduate students working together on physics problems
Hmm.
in teams, and they set up four different scenarios.
4 ways to collaborate. What were they?
So first, a control group. Pretty standard. No AI at all, just the team working together.
Got it. Baseline.
Then three experimental groups. Group one, total free-for-all, unrestricted ChatGPT access. Use your phone, use a shared laptop, whatever.
Okay, the Wild West approach.
Kind of. Then group two, they could only use ChatGPT on a shared team laptop. So one device for the whole team.
Forcing some coordination there. And the last one.
Group three also used a shared laptop, but with two big constraints. First, they had to discuss the problem as a team for at least 10 minutes before even touching the AI.
10 minutes mandatory talk time.
And second, after that, they were limited. Only a maximum of 7 interactions, 7 queries to the AI.
Wow. Okay, 10 minutes first, then only 7 questions. That's really specific. So our mission today is to unpack how these different levels of access changed things, right?
Yep.
Like what did they actually solve the problems? How did they use ChatGPT differently? And crucially, how did it change the way they talk to each other?
Exactly. Let's start with the big picture. Overall performance.
Did working in teams help in general?
Oh, yeah, definitely. Across all groups, team performance was better than when individuals worked alone beforehand. Collaboration usually helps.
Okay, no surprise there.
Ugh.
But let's get to that less is more finding. Where did that show up?
Right. So the really striking thing was that the teams with structured AI access, that's group two with the shared device, and group three with the shared, delayed, and limited access, they showed the biggest jumps in problem-solving scores.
Wait, bigger jumps than the group that could use AI whenever they wanted.
Significantly bigger, yeah, compared to the unrestricted group.
That's wild. So forcing them to share or wait actually made them better. Can we put some numbers on that improvement?
Absolutely. So the control group, no AI, they improved by about 8% on average working as a team.
Okay, 8%.
The unrestricted group, experimental one, they improved by 17%. Better, but,
Double the control group, roughly.
Right. But now experimental group two, the shared access folks, they saw a 34% average gain.
Whoa, 34.
And experimental group three, the delayed and limited access group, they're right up there too with a 31% improvement.
That's incredible. So the limited groups basically doubled the improvement rate again over the unrestricted group. That's
Right.
wow.
It really highlights how the way AI is accessed matters, maybe even more than just having access.
Okay, so it wasn't just if they used AI, but how. Let's dig into that. How much did they actually use ChatGPT? Did the number of queries differ?
Uh-huh. Predictably, the unrestricted group, experimental one, they fired off the most questions to ChatGPT. About 17 queries in total for their task.
17. Okay.
Oh.
Makes sense. They had no limits.
Exactly. But the other two groups, the ones with shared access, experimental 2 had only 7 queries, and experimental 3 had just 6.
Much fewer. So just sharing a device or having those limits really cut down the quantity.
It seems so. It forces a bit more deliberation, maybe.
Right. But fewer questions doesn't necessarily mean worse questions. What about the quality? The study looked at the types of prompts, didn't it?
It did. They classified them. You had unmodified prompts, basically just copy-pasting the problem.
A lazy prompting.
Maybe. Then simple prompts, asking for like one specific thing. Complex prompts involve multiple conditions, maybe needing some background info. And finally, verification prompts, just checking an answer they already thought they had.
Okay, and how did the groups compare on these prompt types?
Well, experimental group one, the unrestricted ones, they leaned heavily on those unmodified prompts, the copy-paste approach. and also on verification prompts.
It suggests maybe a more superficial use, quick answers, quick checks.
That's what it points towards, yeah. Now, experimental group 2, shared access, they had a more balanced mix. They used a bit of everything unmodified, simple, complex.
More varied strategy, maybe.
Seems like it.
Yeah.
But experimental group 3, the delayed limited group, this is really interesting. They mostly used complex prompts.
Because they had to wait and only had a few shots.
Precisely. That 10-minute discussion and the 7-query limit really seemed to push them to, formulate much more thoughtful, targeted questions.
Makes total sense. Maximize the value of each interaction. Did they also look at where the questions came from, like based on the problem itself or the team's discussion?
Yes, they called that dependency, were the queries dependent, meaning pulled straight from the problem text, or independent, incorporating the team's own thinking or reasoning.
Okay, and what did that show?
Again, Group 1, unrestricted, had the most dependent queries, just lifting text from the problem.
Thinking close to the source material.
Right. But Group 3, the delayed limited one, they had the highest percentage of independent queries. Their questions were much more likely to include their own interpretations, their own reasoning developed during that discussion phase.
So they were using the AI not just to get info from the problem, but to test or advance the ideas they'd already worked on together.
Exactly. It was more integrated into their own thinking process.
Okay, that paints a clear picture of how AI was used. Let's shift now to how the AI changed how the students worked together. How did it affect their communication?
Well, one really big finding across all the groups that used AI. Yeah.
Was that they talked less, significantly less.
Yeah.
About a 45% reduction in overall verbal interaction compared to the control group that had no AI.
45% less talking just by having AI in the room, essentially. Wow.
Yeah, it's like the AI becomes this silent third partner that changes the dynamic. Less need, maybe, to talk things through with each other quite as much.
But even though they talked less overall, were there differences in how they talked when they did speak? Like frequency or length?
There were. The control group, no AI, they spoke most often highest utterance frequency. Relatively, yeah. The unrestricted AI group, experimental 1, they actually had the shortest utterances, quick back and forth, maybe.
More transactional, perhaps?
Could be. Interestingly, experimental group 2, the shared access group, they had the longest utterances on average. When they did talk, they said more.
Suggesting maybe more in-depth discussion when they did engage.
Possibly, yeah.
And what about the content of their conversations? What were they actually talking about? The study categorized this too, right?
Yeah.
They looked at discourse patterns, like how much talk was conceptual, really getting into the physics ideas? How much was metacognitive, reflecting on their own learning or process?
Okay.
How much was just question query, asking questions either to each other or about the AI? And how much was non-substantive, like agreements or off-topic chat?
And what were the patterns? How did AI change the substance?
The control group, as you might expect, had a really strong focus on the conceptual stuff. They were digging into the physics principles.
Makes sense. That's all they had to work with.
Right. But experimental group 1, unrestricted access, their conversation shifted. Less conceptual talk and more of those question-query exchanges and non-substantive responses.
So maybe less deep thinking together. More focused on just getting the AI query right or getting a quick answer.
That seems to be the implication. But here's the contrast again. Groups 2 and 3, the structured access groups.
The shared and the delayed ones.
Yep. They managed to maintain higher levels of that conceptual discussion compared to the unrestricted group. And, importantly, they showed a lot more metacognitive statements.
Thinking about their thinking.
Exactly. Reflecting on their understanding, planning their approach, evaluating their progress. This was especially strong in Group 3, the delayed access group.
So that forced discussion period really seemed to encourage them to think about how they were solving the problem, not just what the answer was.
It really looks that way. They weren't just offloading recall to the AI. They seemed to be using it more strategically to check or deepen the understanding they were building collaboratively.
That's a huge point for educators, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just about if students use AI, but structuring it to encourage that metacognition.
Absolutely. The study also gave some qualitative insights, looking at the team's dynamics more closely.
Right, like how they actually approached solving the problem.
Yeah. The control group tended to be more systematic, working through concepts. The AI groups, though, seemed more focused on efficiency, on getting the right answer.
Different goals, almost.
Sort of. Group 1, unrestricted, their first move was often straight to AI. Group 2, shared access, they'd usually talk a bit first, then consult the AI. And group 3, delayed access, they were really noticeable for their strategic planning around when and how to use those precious 7 queries.
That planning element keeps coming up for Group 3. How did they handle roadblocks or uncertainty?
Good question. The control group would, explore, debate, try to figure it out from their own knowledge. Group 1, uncertainty often led straight to a quick chat GPT query.
The instant answer approach.
Pretty much. But groups 2 and 3, again, showed a more blended approach. They discussed the uncertainty first, try to resolve it themselves, and then use the AI more pointedly to tackle what they still couldn't figure out.
So AI is a tool to resolve specific identified sticking points rather than the first resort.
Exactly. There was an example in the paper about designing an experiment. Group 3 apparently debated different methods amongst themselves quite a bit before deciding precisely what information they needed the AI to provide to move forward.
Very deliberate. And what about collaboration patterns? Did roles emerge differently?
Yeah, the control group showed more like natural role sharing based on who knew what. The AI groups, though, showed what the researchers called distributed cognition.
Meaning the thinking was spread out.
Yeah, spread across the students and the AI tool. The AI became part of the group's cognitive system, but how effectively seemed to depend on the access rules.
And did people take on specific AI-related roles?
Well, they noted more meta discussions about how to use the AI in those groups, and particularly in groups 2 and 3 with the shared device or limits, they saw gatekeepers emerge.
Gatekeepers.
Individuals who kind of took charge of the AI interaction, maybe typing the queries, deciding what to ask based on the team's discussion.
Makes sense if only one person can type at a time, or if you have limited questions. Someone needs to manage it.
Right. And just to summarize how they utilize the AI overall, Group 1 was immediate query and verification. Group 2 was more collective formulation and checking consensus. Group 3 involved that strategic planning, sometimes dividing tasks, and even cross-checking what the AI told them.
Okay, so pulling this all together, it really seems like the constraints were the key.
That's the big takeaway. The less is more idea holds up in this context. Structured access, shared device, delayed use, limits seemed much better for effective collaborative problem-solving in physics than just opening the floodgates.
And why do we think that is? You mentioned cognitive offloading earlier.
Exactly. If the AI is always instantly available for any question, there's a real risk students just rely on it too much. They offload the thinking.
They don't do the hard mental work themselves.
Right. Which can actually get in the way of deeper learning and developing their own problem-solving skills. That initial struggle, that discussion, that's often where the real learning happens.
So the structured access forces them to engage more deeply before turning to the AI.
Precisely. It encourages them to be more strategic, to think, okay, what do we really need help with? It leads to a more meaningful integration of the AI as a tool, not just an answer machine.
And it even changes who holds knowledge in the group, potentially. Like AI interaction skills become important.
Yeah, the study hinted at that too. And the big implication for anyone teaching or designing learning experiences is that maybe just saying, sure, use AI isn't the best path. Thinking about specific AI access protocols might be much more effective.
Protocols,
Yeah.
like maybe using shared devices in class, or having a no AI for the first 15 minutes rule, or even limiting queries.
Yeah.
Those constraints could actually be beneficial.
It seems they could. It's about finding that balance, using AI's power without letting it short-circuit the thinking and collaboration we want to foster.
Okay, so to wrap up this deep dive, the counterintuitive idea seems to be true, at least in this physics context. Limiting AI access and collaborative learning can, maybe paradoxically, boost team performance, encourage deeper thinking, and lead to more thoughtful use of the AI and better team interaction.
That's the essence of it. Less really did seem to be more here.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? How could this apply outside of physics?
Yeah.
In your own work, when you collaborate using AI tools, does less direct access, maybe a bit more friction, sometimes lead to better results for you?
Yeah, what kind of access protocols, even informal ones, might actually help you engage more meaningfully when you're working with AI? It's definitely food for thought.
Absolutely. Something for all of you listening to consider in your own context. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.